Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about something that is just incredibly popular in numerous different places online, as well as in various different forms of media to one extent or another, and it's also something that you guys have talked to me about a fair amount recently, considering we've had these kind of on-running videos and follow-ups around manipulation and around people taking advantage of you. And so the topic I want to talk about today is narcissism or narcissistic people. Um, and so I want to break this down into a couple of different sections. First off, I want to talk about kind of what a narcissistic person is, what the general characteristics are for those kinds of individuals, a list of behaviors that are usually displayed to one extent or another, but also what it's not. Because there are some individuals, usually who are lacking in their own self-esteem as well, but not to the point of then having to overcompensate. They're just very down on themselves, who will see someone with a lot of self-confidence, and in a fair number of situations that self-confidence may very well be hard-earned, and they will still suggest that person is a narcissist just because they aren't privy to all of the information that has granted that person that sense of self-esteem and confidence in and of themselves. And so I want to go over the specifics of it so that we know who we're talking about. Then I want to kind of talk about where it's come from. And then at the end of the video, I want to go through four things whereby if you are concerned that you might be narcissistic, or potentially if you are in a relationship with someone else who is displaying these various behaviors, how maybe you can start to prompt some of their behaviors to kind of shift from being entirely self-centered and kind of me focused into something that's more acceptable, if not ideal, because obviously the ideal might take a lot of time, practice, development, discourse, and so on to get to. It's still something that may very well improve the situation, considering that 90% of the articles on this are in regards to having relationships with narcissists. Now, I'm not going to go into that specifically today. But the things that I'm going to cover at the end are probably going to be much more focused on making sure that you don't fall into narcissistic personality kind of traits and behavior patterns, just to make sure that you're in the clear. And then if you guys would like to see this more as a continuing thing, to continue to follow up after one video after the other around manipulation and around these kinds of behaviors and people, then I can come in and take a look at the other facets of this that are out there in the world afterwards. But anyway, let's start off by talking about what narcissistic kind of personalities actually are. What they tend to be characterized by more so than anything else, because obviously they're named after Narcissus, the individual from Greek myth who fell in love with his own reflection. And ultimately it is kind of like that, but it's not purely attached to any one facet of someone's life, and it's characterized by a fair number of traits. But overall, in brief, before we get into the list of traits, we can say that they tend to have quite unstable levels of self-esteem, where they will be disproportionately proud of themselves and self-important, but also have to signal to others and gain the approval and validation of others to support that, even though the initial premise that they have of being more important than others and standing out and being much more just generally better than other people isn't actually supported by fact anyway, and they're not necessarily looking into needing that to be supported, but then they still ask for the support anyway. There's that instability, that up and down in their levels of self-esteem and self-confidence. The next thing is that they tend to lack empathy on a mostly emotional level, but also in various other facets of empathy as a whole. But it's a case of they will not be able to appreciate someone else's point of view. They will not be able to deal with various other situations that they may suddenly be put in, which may very well require a bit of understanding, a bit of give and take. They're only going to want to either have everything given to them or to take everything for themselves either way because of their overinflated self-importance. And then the thing to note is that unlike certain other conditions and unlike certain other things, kind of narcissistic personalities tend to be things that get practiced, and they tend, in terms of the physical, the things that we see, the behaviors we see, they tend to be practiced sets of behaviors and coping skills that has allowed that person to function through certain situations prior, and as a result have built up over time. And very few people are instantly born completely in love with themselves and unable to shift from that. And so let's take a look at the list of specific traits and behaviours. Now, as said, we've already mentioned this first one, which is tending to have a high sense of self-importance, exaggerating their own achievements and talents to suggest that they are better than other people when they may very well not be. They have dreams and aspirations of unlimited power, unlimited success, their brilliance being recognised, their beauty being recognised, or a form of idealised love, which is something that I'm going to bring up later on in regards to some of the stuff at the end. They tend to lack empathy, and especially for the feelings and needs of other people. So it's yes, it can be on the emotional side of things, but also they tend to be lacking in kind of a considerate nature. So even just a practical need for someone else, where a little bit of empathy would allow them to appreciate that that's something that they could influence, and that person may want them to influence, they won't engage with that. They won't have that presence on an empathic scale to put themselves either in that person's situation, pick up on cues, whatever else, be willing to pick up on cues, and then put themselves in. The next one is requiring excessive admiration. As we've mentioned a couple of times before, they will look for recognition, even though their own self-importance and their own exaggerations don't really rely on it. They will still want it because it's everyone's eyes have to be on them. They need everything for themselves. It's a commodity. It's about trade. Everyone should respect them. Everyone should love them. Everyone should think they're attractive. Everyone should realize how amazing and badass they are. And as a result, it's their own self-importance, their own drive to push themselves, or not push themselves, depending on kind of which areas of their lives they're focused on in regards to their narcissistic tendencies and behaviors. It becomes a situation where even if they are right at their lowest and everything has gone wrong for them, it's not going to be their fault, and ultimately they still feel that they should be admired and loved and kind of validated continuously by other people. Believes he or she is special and unique and can be understood only by, or should associate only with, other special or high status people or institutions. Now, again, this one is, we see this a lot in regards to kind of certain celebrities, be they online based, be they out in music or film or TV or whatever else, those that kind of slowly float towards narcissism, or quite quickly float towards narcissism. They want to they feel that they are of a certain type of person that should only be focused on the other people that are like them. They can only truly be understood by the other people that they perceive to be like them, and it's only if that person then shows them that they're not in the same group or whatever else that they dismiss those people as well. And then the next one is the next set of behaviours is they unreasonably expect special behaviour, favourable treatment, or compliance with his or her wishes. Again, divas with their demands. people who expect or demand respect when they've done nothing to earn it, people that will spout lies and yet expect people not to question them, because it's right for this person, so that means that it can't be right. It can't be any different for anyone else, because everyone else should love and admire and whatever this individual. So they desire favourable treatment and all the rest of it. The number of activists, young activists that we see that unfortunately fall into this set of behaviours where unreasonably they are expecting changes to be made, exceptions to be made, to be receiving favourable treatment for absolutely no reason, and they demand compliance with their wishes, including, as we saw in the States last year and the year before, in fact, students kind of protesting and rioting and yelling at members of staff who were just there doing their job and enforcing university policies and university rules. And yet it was still a case of those students feeling that their wishes for favourable treatment and their compliance with those wishes is something that they should just get instantly, rather than something that needed to be earned, worked on, discussed, worked through. It becomes a bit of a easy to highlight situation as a set of behaviours when we look at those kind of things where they are so vocal and so loud and so aggressive in what they are asking for. Exploits and takes advantage of others to achieve their personal ends. Now, we've talked about this again in regards to the kind of situations with manipulation where someone will use whatever leverage they can to get what they want out of you, especially in regards to gaslighting that we talked about before. That is those are the kind of situations that we're talking about here. This person will literally throw anyone else under the bus, use anyone else as a tool as best they can, purely to achieve their own personal ends. And I want to touch on that one especially again later on when we get into some of the other bits and pieces. They tend to be quite envious. They envy or believe others are envious of them, in which case there's that element of kind of paranoia where it's either I want what that person has and I should just have it because I'm awesome, and then or it becomes a case of seeing the people around them, closing themselves off, becoming paranoid because they feel that everyone else should be admiring them, but as a result of admiring them and loving them and thinking that they're so awesome, they want everything that they have, and so they can't possibly associate with those lesser individuals. And then the last one is that they plainly have an attitude of arrogance, or act in an arrogant fashion, which we've all seen that, where people are dismissive, holier than thou, always putting themselves above other people, making a point of suggesting that their opinions or their thoughts are more substantial, concrete, developed than other people's, even if they've got no evidence to support that. We see that a lot, and it's a kind of set of issues that keep going on and on and on. So now that we've talked about the behaviours and we've scanned over those kind of things, where does all this come from? Because from the number of articles and things that you see every day, from the number of you guys that have actually mentioned problems with narcissism, either in yourselves or in others around you, or in regards to the general internet with the number of videos and articles and other things that just, when I started double checking some of my facts and some of my information for this video, it was all about narcissism. There are so many articles, so many videos, so many things, some of which with good information, some of which with bad, some of which that miss the point entirely. But this is obviously a problem that is apparent. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that it hasn't been apparent in the past, but it's thanks to, again, the internet, sharing information, greater communication between people over long ranges, over long distances, through different communities. We're seeing much more of it be talked about and dealt with. But also, as I said, where has all of this come from? And the simple fact is that it comes from the cult of self, the cult of personality kind of thing that we see in a lot of places these days. It's all about being a certain person's fan. It's all about supporting a certain politician or a certain party purely because they're X, Y, and Z thing that you think they are. Not based on their policies or anything else, but just because you have attached yourself to the way that they've done that. It's you go into a workplace and it's never about kind of working together when people are competing for jobs and seeing who can manage that job most effectively through kind of continuous working with a team and who stands out, who does the most, who develops best. It's all about competing. It's all about bigging yourself up and removing your modesty, your humility, and driving forward with it. And especially since the kind of 1960s, 1950s, 1960s, I guess, you started seeing a lot more of not just individualism, but focus on these kind of things, because that's when you had, after World War II, especially in the States, with it being such a large influencer worldwide, you had this big kind of pickup on industry and on what we now see as the kind of early stages and early growth of kind of corporate America, which then of course spanned out across huge amounts of the planet and kind of prompted the development of various other places as well to one degree or another. You had places like the UK developing after World War II as well, which then also saw that upsweep in kind of focusing more on the individual, the main enemy that brought people together had gone. There were times of peace, prosperity, development, everything else that was going on that wasn't so great, that was conflicting, with things like the Cold War that weren't necessarily right out in people's faces all the time. And so as a result, there was a lot more time for the average person to kind of take a look at kind of developing themselves to achieve their full potential and being driven to do so, and ensuring that the moments when your lower needs, things like just stuff you needed to survive, physical safety and what have you, food, water, when those weren't an issue anymore because they were readily available, then the only thing that you had to chase after was that full potential of yourself, which, when competing with other people who were doing the same thing, became that big kind of development that drove people towards paying so much attention to themselves. And I'm not talking about introspection, I'm talking about then trying to kind of pick themselves up, develop themselves, fight against their own insecurities, and at times we're talking about development of greater self-esteem, but then we're also talking about the much more substantial upshift towards the very self-focused narrative. For instance, in a long-running study that analysed the high school students' responses to "I am an important person," which covered about 4 decades. In 1950, 12% agreed that they were important people, because, well, in the 1950s, you still had a lot of people that acknowledged this hierarchy, this stratification of people, which we are hardwired to a degree to put ourselves into. But then by 1989, the year after I was born, that number had soared to roughly 80% of those students that were asked this question. Am I an important person? Or I am an important person, rather. 80% of them suddenly agreed. And it's a continuing trend towards kind of these higher levels of narcissism, because they are seeing themselves as a very important person, and that it's often put into kind of situations and measured by statements such as "I will never be satisfied until I get what I deserve." It's not what I want. I would say right now, I have things that I want, in which case I'm probably not going to be satisfied until I get those things. But I'm working towards them, I'm developing towards them. There are certain things I can't control and certain things that will bum me out because they are going to actively get in my way. At the same time, though, I'm going to be going, well, if they do get in my way, I need to work around them. It's not on anyone else. I don't deserve it. You only deserve what you get. You only reap what you sow. And so, it's a case of being down to earth, grounded, relaying kind of information out to people, not just about me, but about just stuff. Which is why I'm talking about this now. I might be using myself as an example, but I'm talking about the psychology, the elements, and then we're going to be talking about how we deal with this in a minute. But again, this cult of personality has grown and developed and become so much more self-focused and focused around things like I, me, mine. And this is partly due to things like cultural shift. Where you've got younger people absorbing the what is seen as positive from the generation before through media, through interactions with parents. And that's how, as we were saying earlier on, these are coping mechanisms for the most part that get kind of put into place. And so if the best way to cope in school is being an entitled brat because it gets you what you want, or going into work, on your first job, being a very demanding individual makes you seem like to your potentially quite uninformed manager that you're directive, that you're strong, that you're focused, that you know what you're doing, then you're more likely to get a promotion, and so that becomes a reward to then drive you forward in solidifying those behaviors. But obviously this hurts us over time, especially because it as we were talking earlier, it drives us apart, it limits empathy, it causes other people to want to step away from us, and also boosting of self-esteem in unsuccessful people has been demonstrated time and time again to harm their performance. And in the modern age, various studies have found that social media as well is fueling this, where it's a case of many posts and things like that are put out on social media. Another study found that about half of those status updates that were posted were purely there to make you look good in the eyes of others. We've all seen those status updates, those posts on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever, Instagram and whatever else, where it's a couple that you kind of know, someone you went to school with, or someone that you see every now and again that you still consider to be a friend, and every time there's a picture up, every time there's something else, it looks like they're having a wonderful life, and then out of nowhere they split with their partner, they lose half their things, and it all goes horribly wrong. Why is that? Because they were only presenting the things that they wanted, that they thought would get good feedback to others, that would make them look good in others' eyes. And that the kind of various humble brags about having amazing vacations, or taking great pictures, or driving themselves into an echo chamber, so that when they just show like for like, then there's this continual swirl of good feeling around the group that keeps them there. Again, we see this in social media in regards to people that ascribe to one extreme political kind of ideology or another. They come in and they go, yeah, I hate this kind of person too, and then everyone cheers and claps, and then someone else comes in and says the same thing, and everyone cheers and claps, and then someone else, as soon as there's a person that comes in and goes, well, I don't hate them, but they're still our neighbours, our friends, our colleagues, our family. We have to find a way to deal with them without hating them. That person gets squashed because they've stepped outside of that boundary, and now everyone else is scapegoating them as the reason why why there's a weakness, why they aren't as good as they think they are. And so when it comes to all of this kind of stuff, one of the biggest examples that I can give from my life was that you guys know that I like gaming. I've talked about tabletop gaming, and I've briefly mentioned going and LARPing before as well. LARPing, for those that you don't know, live action role play, actually kind of taking on a very physical element, almost like a combat sport element to a role play kind of open air theatre kind of environment almost. In those environments, in a normal game, even if it's a game of D&D, everyone wants to be the hero. Everyone wants to be the individual that saves the day, is a badass, part of that team, doing their thing. Take that into an open air live action environment, and you don't get the same results. Why? Because everyone wants to be the hero still, but as a result, no one is. And it's not a case of just the experience being diluted. It's the case of some of those behaviours we were talking about earlier, exploiting and taking advantage of other people to get to their personal ends. Jumping in on things like, stuff that either happened away from the field, stuff that happens on the field, the kind of causes upset, that they can then leverage. Stuff like deliberately putting someone on the back foot, or taking advantage of prior friendships outside of the game, outside of that gaming environment, to squash someone else, to drive them out. Where they don't feel that the rules apply to them, that they feel everyone else should just do as they say and as they want just because they are there. There are so many people that want that, and especially considering that there are so many people in those kinds of environments who are there for escapism because they are potentially lacking in personal self-esteem, and they are there for their little power trip to have fun with. Some people are responsible with that, an awful lot of them aren't. And so as a result, when it comes to those situations where you've got players organising players and everyone's self-focused, you don't get anywhere with it. It only ever turns into arguments, it turns into upset, it turns into a breakdown of the event that's going on. And that's kind of horrific to watch. And especially if you're one of the people that's trying to do the right thing and is then being taken advantage of and squashed out, that can be really demoralising. I've had that happen to me at least a couple of times. And so it's a case of self-importance needs to be something that's reined in and that's moderated, and that isn't just built up in people who aren't succeeding otherwise. If you give someone a self-esteem boost and make them feel that they deserve something, that they are better than they actually are, and whatever else, then if they're unsuccessful, then they blame their lack of success on other things. They never actually try something new. They never try harder. And this is one of the things that I have to take into account when I'm coaching people. If someone comes to me and they're just looking for me to stroke their ego, so whilst they're not actually achieving their goals, they're not doing the work, they're not trying, then I'm not doing my job, because part of my job is to hold those people accountable when they fail, so that then they are aware of it, so that they can use that knowledge of where they fell down and what went wrong to pick themselves up again and develop further. In which case, without that falling down, if I just stroked their ego, gave them a bit of a pep talk and a boost every time that they made a mess or they didn't do the work that they had agreed to do or anything like that, then all they're ever going to do is demand more, want more, and get more and more upset, do less and less, because they don't feel it's worth it and they're not getting what they feel they deserve. If I turn around to someone though and go, right, at the beginning of this, you deserve nothing. You only get what you work for. I'm here to help you plan for it. I'm here to help you keep accountable to it. I'm here to make sure that we go through the path of least resistance. But beyond that, it's all on you. In which case, that person now knows what what the expectations are, what they need to do, and if they don't do it, then the only person that's responsible for it is themselves. Because I'm going to sit there for their hour session with them and go through everything in detail, ask a lot of questions, repeat stuff back to them, summarize stuff for them, make sure that they've written down their plan. But if they then don't do it, obviously if they're like, I was in a car accident and I kind of lost half my leg, then, you know, fair enough. I'm not gonna go overboard on them at any stage during that. But if it's just a case of, oh well, I just, you know, I didn't really do it because, you know, I kind of went out for drinks one night and I just kind of didn't feel like doing it the next day, and it was just kind of, it was just a bit, it just seemed so hard, you know, then that's a case of me going, well, yeah, that's why you hired me, because I've literally helped you spell out the path of least resistance for you, and yet you still haven't bothered. In which case, there are some people that do that because they're afraid, and that opens up more stuff for me to go through with them. When it's just someone that feels like it should fall in their lap, that it should fall right in front of them, then I can't work with that person unless they change their perspective. And so, moving on into the last section that we've got here, here are the 4 things that stand out to me that really make sure that you don't fall into that space. You know, you don't fall into that area where I can't work with you, where you aren't going to be helping yourself. You're not going to be keeping yourself at a high level of activity and success and development because you are too focused on what you think people should just give you. So the first thing, and this is one of the most important things, is when don't worry about self-esteem, don't worry about your self-confidence, focus on evidence. If you have done a thing, and as a result, after doing that thing, you have a result, now you have evidence. I've stood up in front of entire auditoria of 500 or so people at the maximum, face to face, and spoken whilst they have been very angry at me because things have gone wrong. And I have been there to crowd control and mitigate, and I have been able to get those people round to my side and work with me to achieve the end result that they actually want. Great. I can now say, yes, well, I have all of that down. That is something that I actually did, something that I actually achieved, something that was a difficulty maybe at the time, but it's something that I got past. In which case, could I do it again? Yes. That's something that always comes back up in my head when I'm recording these videos, or when I see that there are thousands of views on a video or something like that for a few of my videos where I've just been kind of blown away by it, where it's been several times the number of people that I've ever in fact spoken in front of in person. It always brings me back to, you know, I've become more confident in front of talking to you guys through this camera here, as opposed to having an audience in front of me. Well, I would personally prefer an audience in front of me, to be honest. But at the same time, if I can do it in front of an audience, which is by far the more difficult thing, then I can do this. Yeah? It then informs not just my high opinion of myself in regards to that specific situation, but it also informs me in regards to where I should be confident. If I can talk in front of hundreds of people, I can definitely talk in front of a camera by myself. Yeah, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's something I can do. That focus on evidence, that focus on things that you have done, that you can demonstrate, that you can show, that there is fact to support, that allows you to not slip too far off towards being so self-focused, because you're always looking for information, for evidence from outside of you to support what you're doing, how you did it, and so on. Now, there are some narcissists who have developed their self-confidence and self-esteem because they are quite high achievers, and as a result they feel that they're a higher caliber of person because they have actually done better than others. In which case, the evidence thing may very well not help them as much, because there probably is at least some, probably not all, but some evidence to support what they're saying when they're saying it. But as we've said, they do tend to exaggerate. In which case, the next thing that I feel is most important is finding loving critics. And when I say that, I mean members of your family, colleagues, friends, your partner, who will call you on whether or not you're getting too big for your boots, whether or not you're actually kind of holding to things properly, remembering things properly. There's a little bit of a narcissist in all of us, where sometimes we want to tell a story and we want to make it sound more badass than it actually was. But when it's all the time, that's when it becomes a problem. A little bit of exaggeration, a little bit of over-the-top storytelling once in a while, fair enough. In regards to every single time you open your mouth, though, that's where the problems start, that's where those other behaviours start to fall in which case having someone, friend, colleague, family member, loved one, whoever around you that's willing to just, not just smack you down, but, in a friendly fashion point out to you where you're not necessarily being accurate, where you don't have proof for what you're saying, where you're not entirely able to demonstrate what you're saying, and so on and so forth, that can be really, really helpful to you overall. It's the same reason that people, again, will hire me. I'm there to make sure that if someone does start floating too high off their seat, or if their head gets too big so that they don't fit out a doorway, that's one of the reasons why I am there, to bring them back to reality, so that they're not just sinking into the floor and not doing the work, but also so that they're not setting themselves goals and doing things that are so far and beyond them that they're going to only end up failing in the long run and then looking for someone to blame. It's that balancing act, and there needs to be a person there that can help with that balancing act. At the very least, they need to be there for the beginning, so that you can start breaking those behaviours, learning where the balance point is, so that you can sit right on top of it and not be shaken. The next thing is self-acceptance, and this is something that we've talked about before in regards to introspection, in regards to kind of developing yourself, but learning to accept who you are, what you do, is important, because if you can't accept yourself on those levels, on those things, then you're probably going to end up being either unnecessarily negative towards yourself, unnecessarily negative towards the rest of the world, easily pushed around, and so on and so forth. Having that appreciation of who you are, what you do, it's something that we spoke about in regards to the manipulation and gaslighting side of things. Stick up for yourself, know what you have done and haven't done, and when it comes to accepting yourself, you're not perfect. No one is. No one can be. There is literally no way that any human being can be absolutely perfect, amazing at everything, great health, amazing looking, and all of these other things all rolled into one. No such thing as a perfect human. Don't expect yourself to be one. Don't expect it from anyone else. It's just simply a case of appreciating what you have and what you can do. And everyone can improve. Everyone has potential to improve. But it's just a case of accepting that starting point, accepting who you are, what can change, what can't change. If you're upset because you don't necessarily look your best, well, there are ways to make you look better. Or not necessarily look your best, but if you don't find yourself particularly attractive, fine. But there are still ways that you can own that, handle that, and make yourself look good to others, even if it's still something that you maybe don't have an awful lot to work with necessarily, for instance, just as a blanket example there. But then the last thing that I would say here, point number 4, is this was stated by a communications professor, Moore Naman, and he made a point of saying, where there are so many people who are posting, when you've got half of posts all being about showing off to other people, looking for their validation, you've got about 80% of people who are what he calls me formers, who like to share only what's going on in their lives, only what's going on around them, only stuff that's like, look at me, this is my amazing life, or even just look at me, this is how crap my life is. It's all looking for stuff from other, for validation from other people based on themselves. Whilst 20% of people, myself included, I don't post an awful lot on social media. I'll like a few things and I'll share a few interesting things, but otherwise most of what I do on social media is for videos for you guys. Those 20% are informers, and these are the people who will post information, or they will post interesting articles, funny videos. They are for the most part, the large reason why cat memes and various other memes spread across the internet, because they will not be posting about themselves. They will be posting about these daft things that they have found online, which then get picked up by other people afterwards. I'm not saying that the 80% only do about themselves, but it's a case of, there's a starting point for things like memes, and it tends to come from the informers that are posting out that extra information first. And as a result, the suggestion, the Dr. Naman, or Narman, however you want to pronounce their name, says, is that, looking to informers as a kind of way to develop behaviours online. So where informers tend to potentially have more satisfying interactions, have more friends, or at least be able to interact with more people in a friendly way. And then in terms of both online and offline, they're not focused on themselves, they're focused on the stuff around them. Again, these are the people that probably already are focused on stuff around them, people, things, information, evidence, that then supports who they are and what they're doing, rather than the people who are just focused on themselves, their own beliefs, their own things that they want to do, their own self-worth. And so it's not always easy to break a habit with social media where you're only ever posting about yourself. But instead of limiting the amount of time you have for social media, firstly, and then as part of your usual, your daily dose of social media, for instance, instead of going and looking for things that will just rack up as many likes as possible that you can say or do, or pictures or whatever else, instead, ignore the likes, ignore the dislikes, ignore any of those other metrics that they give you that are there just to give you a little dose of dopamine or serotonin or whatever else that pops into your head when you see that number. Don't worry about the likes and dislikes and the number of subscribers, number of followers, or anything like that. Work on understanding other people. Work on understanding the world around you. Work on finding things that are entertaining. Work on inspiring others. There are now 130 odd subscribers on this channel, and I'm very thankful to all of you for turning up and for finding something in the videos that I've been putting out that you have stuck around for. But at the same time, I'm more focused on inspiring, bringing you useful information, showing you a more relaxed time where we can still learn stuff through gaming, bringing other stuff that's just interesting or useful, a different take on it, an analysis here, there, and everywhere. I want to bring all of those things to you guys, and that's the important thing. Even if this channel still only had like 8 subscribers, but all of you were looking at the stuff that I'm putting out, finding useful things in it, that would be amazing, and that would be enough. And so that is the strategy that's suggested by this communications professor, and it's something that I personally think is a healthier way of dealing with social media, to make sure that you don't get stuck on your own self-worth, on your worth being defined by those social media elements that then disconnect you from reality. In reality, there is no such thing as a like button to press. Black Mirror did its episode on this in season 2, I think. And it's a case of, thankfully, we don't have that in real life, because that episode in and of itself demonstrated how bad it could get. But anyway, guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you like me to do a follow-up on being in relationships with narcissistic people, or family, narcissists in the workplace, whatever? Would you find those useful? please let me know down in the comments, or leave a like if that's something that you would like to see. Otherwise, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the video later. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the video later. Take care.